They didn't want you to know the real reason Israel abandoned God. Not a simple story of disobedience, a shocking, intimate betrayal. Behind the stern warnings of prophets lies a tale of three deities so seductive, so terrifying, they reshaped a nation's soul. Baal, the storm god of ecstasy; Asherah, the mother goddess of creation; Molech, the fire god of ultimate sacrifice. This is not ancient trivia. This is the suppressed story of a divine love triangle gone horrifically wrong, a spiritual war fought in the high places and in the heart, whose echoes are calling you right now. The veil is lifting. You're standing in a forbidden place, not a temple ruin, a spiritual crime scene. The victim, the covenant between Yahweh and his people. The suspects, three ancient deities whose names were whispered with fear and longing: Baal, Asherah, Molech. The Bible presents their worship as Israel's great sin, a monolithic act of rebellion, but that's the edited version. The truth is darker, more intimate, and far more dangerous to the story you were told. This was not a sudden apostasy. It was a slow, sensual seduction, a deliberate replacement of a demanding, invisible God with gods you could see, touch, and manipulate. Gods who promised rain, fertility, and power on command. Imagine the pressure. Your crops fail, your womb is barren, your enemies gather. Yahweh speaks through prophets of trust and patience, but Baal's priests chant on the hilltop, and the rain comes. Which God feels more real? This is where the fracture begins. Not in grand defiance, but in desperate, whispered prayers to other altars. The evidence is etched in stone and buried in the dirt, and it tells a story they tried to erase. If something in you recognizes this hunger for the raw, unfiltered truth of what happened, leave a comment and stay with this story. Until the end, your reaction tells me to keep opening these doors for you. To understand the seduction, you must first feel the tension of the land. Canaan, the promised land, flowing with milk and honey and drenched in blood and devotion to older powers. When the tribes of Israel crossed the Jordan, they didn't enter a spiritual vacuum. They invaded a cosmos. Every hill was a high place, a bama crowned with Asherah's sacred pole. Every spring and river was a dwelling of Baal's consorts. The very soil was understood as the body of the gods. Yahweh was a god of the mountain, of the thunderous exodus and the desert covenant. But here, divinity was immanent, woven into the vines, the rainfall, the act of lovemaking. The Canaanite pantheon offered a direct transaction, worship for bounty. It was a religion of sensation. You could taste the sacrificial meal, feel the rhythmic drums of Baal's rites, embrace the carved form of Asherah. Yahweh demanded faith in the unseen, obedience to a law, fidelity to a story. The clash was inevitable. Israel didn't just live among Canaanites. They married them, traded with them, longed for their stability. The Baal cycle promised a predictable world. He dies, he rises, the rains return. Yahweh's ways were mysterious, his blessings conditional. The temptation wasn't merely to add another god to the roster, it was to replace a relationship of covenant with a contract of control. But beneath the fertility rites lay a terrifying secret. One of these gods didn't just demand worship, he demanded your firstborn. And Israel was about to say yes. Let's meet the trinity of temptation, starting with the one who offered ecstatic release. Baal-Hadad, the rider on the clouds. His name means Lord, a direct challenge to Yahweh's title. He wasn't a distant statue, he was the crack of lightning, the life-giving storm, the raw power of nature unleashed. His worship was a sensory explosion, symbols, chanting ritual prostitution, the intoxicating smell of rain on dry earth. The prophets called it whoring, and the language is painfully intimate. Israel wasn't just worshipping a false god, she was committing spiritual adultery, seeking a visceral thrill her covenant husband seemingly withheld. Then Asherah. Often reduced to a mere pole, she was the queen of heaven, the mother of gods, the nurturing womb of creation. For women especially, she represented divine feminine power utterly absent in the austere Yahweh cult. She was compassion, fertility, and presence. Archaeologists have found countless terracotta figurines of a goddess holding her breasts in Judean homes' private devotion, a silent prayer for a child, a plea for nourishment. Yahweh had no consort, no feminine counterpart. Asherah offered what he seemingly refused, a mother's touch. But the third is different. Molech, or Milcom, is not a god of life, but of death. A god of fire and burnt offering, a god whose bronze statue, heated until it glowed, awaited the ultimate pledge of loyalty. This is the invisible architecture of the spiritual war. Baal offered the passion of life. Asherah offered the comfort of creation, but Molech offered the power of ultimate surrender. Together they presented a complete, terrifying alternative spirituality, and the throne of Yahweh in the temple was about to get a rival, but who would dare place it there? The rupture did not happen in the shadows. It was inaugurated by kings. King Solomon, the wisest of all, opened the door. 1 Kings 11 documents his fatal flaw. To please his hundreds of foreign wives, he built high places for Chemosh and Molech on the Mount of Olives, directly opposite Yahweh's temple. The geographic symbolism is chilling. The god of child sacrifice given a dwelling place, gazing upon the dwelling place of the god of life. This was state-sanctioned apostasy. But the true crisis came with King Ahab and Queen Jezebel. Jezebel wasn't just a Baal worshipper, she was a missionary. She imported 450 prophets of Baal and 400 prophets of Asherah, turning the royal court in Samaria into a Canaanite sanctuary. She systematically hunted Yahweh's prophets, seeking to erase his voice from the land. This was no longer syncretism blending beliefs. This was a hostile takeover, a coup against the God of Abraham. The conflict culminates in the explosive confrontation on Mount Carmel, Elijah versus the 450 prophets of Baal. The stakes: who truly sends the fire, who truly brings the rain? The narrative thrills with Yahweh's victory. But read between the lines. The fact that such a public duel was necessary proves Baal's hold was absolute in the public imagination. The people were limping between two opinions because both gods seemed real. Elijah's fire from heaven is a dramatic rebuttal, but the spiritual seduction runs deeper than one miracle can cure, because even after the fire, Jezebel remains in power. And in the south, a different king is about to commit an atrocity that will stain the royal line forever. The aftermath of this spiritual adultery is written in fire and blood. While the northern kingdom spirals under Ahab's dynasty, Judah faces its own horror. King Ahaz, facing a military crisis, doesn't just pray to Molech, he passes his own son through the fire. The phrase is a deliberate euphemism, a literary shielding of an act so abominable the text can barely describe it. The child, a royal prince, is burned alive as an offering in the Valley of Hinnom, just outside Jerusalem. Think of the sound, the smell, the theological shockwave. The king, the representative of God's covenant with David, has just performed the ultimate act of Canaanite worship. He has declared in the most irreversible way that Molech's power supersedes Yahweh's. This isn't a distant hilltop ritual, it's at the gates of the holy city. His son, King Hezekiah, tries to reform, tearing down the high places, but his son Manasseh outdoes Ahaz in evil. 2 Kings 21 says he rebuilt the high places, erected an Asherah pole inside the temple itself, the ultimate desecration, and made his own son pass through the fire. He filled Jerusalem with innocent blood. The consequences are catastrophic and explicit. Because of Manasseh's sins, Jerusalem will fall. The divine marriage is broken. The covenant is shattered. The prophets scream into the void, their words a searing indictment of a people who exchanged their glory for something useless. But wait, a haunting question lingers. If Yahweh was so opposed to Asherah, why have archaeologists found inscriptions that seem to link their names together? What if the betrayal was even more complicated than we've been told? The primary evidence isn't just the biblical condemnation, it's the stones that cry out. In 1975, at a site called Kuntilet Ajrud, a remote desert way station, archaeologists found jar fragments with shocking inscriptions. Written in Old Hebrew, they read, "I bless you by Yahweh of Samaria and by his Asherah," and again, "by Yahweh of Teman and by his Asherah." The world of biblical scholarship reeled. His Asherah. The possessive pronoun is explosive. Was Asherah considered Yahweh's consort, his divine wife, by a significant number of Israelites? This isn't pagan heresy found in a Baal temple. This is a pious blessing invoking Yahweh alongside a partner. Similar inscriptions have been found at Khirbet el-Qom. The evidence suggests that for many ordinary Israelites, worshipping Yahweh and venerating Asherah were not contradictory. They had merged the two. The stern prophets were fighting not just against foreign gods, but against a popular domesticated form of their own faith that gave Yahweh a wife and mother goddess. This reframes the entire conflict. The battle wasn't just Israel versus Canaan. It was a civil war within Israelite theology itself. The transcendent, aniconic, solo God of the prophets versus the immanent, family-oriented God of the people. The biblical text is the manifesto of the winning side, but the graffiti from the desert is the whisper of the lost majority. They didn't see themselves as abandoning God. They thought they were honoring him better. But then there's Molech, and the evidence for his worship is not just textual. It's in the tiny charred bones of infants. The hidden testimony of Molech worship is not written on potsherds, but in the silent ash of Tophet's sacrificial precincts. The most famous is at Carthage, a Phoenician colony. Jezebel was Phoenician, where thousands of urns containing the cremated remains of children and animals have been found. For decades, scholars debated if this was merely infant burial. But recent forensic analysis confirms the horrifying truth. The bones show signs of sacrificial burning. In Israel, while a definitive Tophet hasn't been found, the textual evidence is overwhelming and grim. Jeremiah condemns the practice in the Valley of Hinnom, a place that would become Gehenna, the symbol of hell. Ezekiel says God gave Israel over to defiling statutes, including the command to sacrifice every firstborn. The most chilling verse is in Psalm 106, 37-38. They sacrificed their sons and their daughters to false gods, and the land was desecrated by their blood. This was not a marginal cult. It was the logical, monstrous endpoint of a theology of transaction. If Baal and Asherah demanded worship for life, Molech demanded death for power, the ultimate guarantee of blessing, the final proof of loyalty. It was spiritual terrorism. And it worked because it exploited the deepest human fears and desires: security, victory, divine favor. What could be more valuable than your child? Offering him was the supreme act of devotion. Yahweh's demand was different. Circumcision, a symbol of covenant, not consumption. But in moments of existential terror, which God seemed more powerfully consequential, the one who asked for everything. Yet, amidst this darkness, a remnant preserved a different truth. They wrote it down, hid it, and passed it on. Their witness would change everything. Who were the keepers of the flame? They were the prophets. Yes, Elijah, Elisha, Isaiah, Jeremiah. But they were also the anonymous faithful. The families who, despite the royal Asherah pole in the temple, refused the figurines. The scribes who meticulously copied the Torah scrolls while kings burned them. The Levites who sang the Psalms of Zion, even as Molech's fires glowed in the valley. They formed a countercultural community bound by memory and text. Their weapon was the story, the Exodus, the covenant at Sinai. They kept alive the narrative of a God who saves, not a God who must be appeased. They remembered that Yahweh required justice, mercy, and humility, not infant bones. This underground river of fidelity surfaced during reforms, like under King Josiah. When the Book of the Law was found in the temple, likely Deuteronomy, its curses against idolatry sparked a national purge. Josiah tore down the high places, smashed the Asherah poles, and defiled the Valley of Hinnom to make it ritually unfit for Molech. For a generation, the tide turned, but the keepers knew the human heart's pull toward the tangible. They encoded warnings into the very fabric of their liturgy. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. This wasn't just monotheism, it was a war cry against the triune temptation of Baal, Asherah, and Molech. If you feel that you were made for this kind of stubborn, hidden truth, write in the comments what most shook you so far and share this video with one person who also hungers for more. Your voice helps this buried story reach the ones who need it. The keepers preserved the story, but could they survive the coming storm? The storm arrived with the Babylonian army. In 586 BC, Jerusalem fell, the temple was destroyed, and the elite were exiled. It was the ultimate theological crisis. The prevailing ancient belief was that a nation's defeat meant its gods were weaker. Had Baal and Marduk of Babylon beaten Yahweh? The prophets in exile faced this agonizing question and delivered a revolutionary answer: no. This was not Yahweh's defeat, but his righteous judgment. The exile was the direct consequence of worshipping those other gods. The destruction was the divorce decree finalized. In the crucible of Babylon, stripped of land, temple, and king, something profound happened. The remnant was refined. Without a physical center, they doubled down on the text, the law, and the memory of covenant. Syncretism died in Babylon. You couldn't build a high place in a foreign land. The experience forged a rigorous text-based monotheism that would become Judaism. When they returned, the temptation of the Canaanite triad was broken. The books of Ezra and Nehemiah show a community obsessed with purity, separating from foreign wives and fiercely devoted to the Torah alone. The later prophets like Zechariah and Malachi mention no Baal, no Asherah, no Molech. It seems the cancer was cut out, but was it? Or did the desire simply go underground, morphing into new forms? The evidence suggests the allure of the tangible never fully died. It just awaited a new expression. And centuries later, in the most unexpected place, scholars would find proof that the old goddess never fully left the people's imagination. The deeper truth this journey reveals is not about ancient idolatry. It's about the perennial human hunger. Baal, Asherah, and Molech represent three timeless pathways we take when God feels silent, distant, or too demanding. Baal is the god of immediate power and ecstatic experience, the shortcut to blessing, the spiritual high. Asherah is the god of accessible comfort and nurturing immanence, the divine made soft and familiar. Molech is the god of ruthless transaction, the belief that ultimate suffering or sacrifice can manipulate the divine will. We may not worship bronze statues, but we chase their shadows. We seek spiritual thrills, Baal, reduce God to a comforting therapist, Asherah, or believe our suffering earns us favor, Molech. The prophetic critique is eternally relevant. You have abandoned the fountain of living water and dug for yourselves cracked cisterns. The God of the covenant offers a relationship complex, demanding, mysterious, and rooted in faithful love. The triad offers a contract clear, transactional, and ultimately dehumanizing. Yahweh's jealousy, so often misunderstood, is the fury of a betrayed lover watching his beloved seek satisfaction in abusive relationships. The exile was not just punishment, it was an intervention. a brutal, loving surgery to remove the idols from the heart of the people. This story is the backdrop of the entire biblical drama, setting the stage for a radically new kind of intervention. One that would not come with fire from heaven, but with flesh in a manger. This is where it becomes about you. Right now, your calling. You stand at the same crossroads Israel faced, not with stone idols, but with the inner altars. What do you turn to when God feels distant? Where do you seek control, comfort, or ecstasy? The ancient triad's legacy is the perpetual temptation to fashion a God we can manage, a God of our own understanding, shaped by our desires. The biblical story is an invitation to something terrifyingly beautiful. A relationship with a God who cannot be controlled, who defies imagery, who offers himself not in return for sacrifice, but as the sacrifice. The coming of Jesus Christ is the ultimate answer to the Baal Asherah Molech crisis. In Christ, God provides the thunderous power of Baal, but over death, not crops. He provides the nurturing, maternal love of Asherah. How often I have longed to gather your children. And he becomes the Molech sacrifice himself, the son offered by the Father, not to appease an angry deity, but to satisfy his own justice and love. He walks into the fire of Gehenna's symbol, so no child ever must again. He fulfills and obliterates the old temptations in one act. Your spiritual journey is about identifying which ancient altar you are still drawn to, and letting it be dismantled by grace. But to fully grasp this, you need to see the physical proof. You need to stand where they stood. The physical traces are everywhere if you know where to look. In the city of David, archaeologists have found countless Astarte, a goddess like Asherah, figurines in homes from the time of the kings. At Megiddo and Hazor, temples to Baal and Asherah stand in stark relief. The Teldan stele mentions the House of David, but it was found near a massive high place. The Valley of Hinnom, Gehenna, is a real, tangible ravine south of Jerusalem's old city walls. You can walk it today. It's a park now, quiet and green, a chilling monument to horrors past. At sites like Tel Beersheba, a horned altar was discovered dismantled and reused in a wall-likely part of King Hezekiah's reform, turning a pagan altar into mere construction material. But the most profound evidence isn't a thing, it's an absence. After the exile, the figurines stop. The inscriptions linking Yahweh and Asherah vanish. The archaeological record shows a dramatic shift toward an aniconic, text-centered faith. The stones tell the story of a people purged by fire who returned home with a singular focus. The land itself bears the scars of the spiritual war. These aren't just relics, they are witnesses. They testify that the biblical narrative isn't myth. It's a report from the battlefield of a nation's soul, and the battlefield is not closed, it lives within you. Yet this evidence survived against incredible odds, because a powerful force worked for centuries to simplify, sanitize, and silence the messy complexity of this story. The opposition to this full story began in antiquity. The Deuteronomistic editors, compiling the books of Kings, had a theological agenda. To show sin leads to exile. They streamlined a complex history of syncretism into a clear narrative of rebellion. Later, religious authorities, both Jewish and Christian, had little interest in exploring the provocative idea that Yahweh might have had a popular consort. It contradicted pure monotheism. In the Middle Ages, the focus was on allegory and law, not on the gritty archaeological and textual nuances that suggest a messy religious evolution. In the modern era, some theological circles still resist these findings, fearing they undermine biblical authority. But true authority isn't afraid of the dirt. The suppression isn't a conspiracy, it's often a byproduct of a desire for doctrinal neatness. The full story, with its blessing inscriptions, its household idols, its royal child sacrifice, is uncomfortable. It shows the people of God not as plaster saints, but as real humans wrestling with the same addictive spiritual shortcuts we do. It shows Yahweh not as a distant tyrant, but as a passionate, wounded lover fighting for the heart of his bride against seductive, destructive rivals. This is a more powerful, more realistic, and ultimately more gracious story. It means God's faithfulness shines brighter against the darkness of our repeated betrayals. Now you know what they feared. The question is, what will you do with this knowledge? Will you let it complicate your faith into something deeper, more resilient and more real? Your decision point is now. This isn't academic history. This is a mirror. The triad of Baal, Asherah, and Molech maps onto the idols of your own heart. The pursuit of spiritual experience over obedience, Baal. The desire for a God who only comforts and never challenges, Asherah. And the belief that your suffering or extreme sacrifice obligates God to bless you, Molech. The prophetic call echoes, "Return to me. Abandon the cracked cisterns. The living water is still offered." This journey through Israel's darkest sin reveals the stunning depth of divine patience and the catastrophic cost of misplaced worship. It ends with a choice. Will you accept a faith that is messy, mysterious, and rooted in covenantal love? Or will you default to the old, tangible transactions? Will you share this uncomfortable truth with others trapped in modern versions of the same ancient traps? If this revelation is reshaping how you see the sacred and you want more forgotten texts and forbidden histories uncovered, say it in the comments and follow this channel. Your support is what makes the next revelations possible. You are part of the lineage of the keepers now. The story survived for you. But there's one final explosive revelation about the nature of the God who fought this war. The final unveiling brings us back to the beginning. The three gods that made Israel abandon God were not more powerful. They were merely more predictable. They offered an illusion of control in a chaotic world. But the God of Israel, Yahweh, was offering something infinitely more profound. A story. A story with him at the center. A story of redemption that could absorb even the horror of Molech's fires and the betrayal of Baal's altars. The shocking truth is that Yahweh's victory was not demonstrated by wiping out the rivals in a supernatural battle, but by out-suffering them, out-loving them, and out-enduring them. He let his people go into the arms of these lovers until they discovered the abuse for themselves. He presided over the destruction of his own temple to break the addiction. This is not the God of simple power. This is the God of agonizing, faithful love. Baal is dust. Asherah's poles are splinters. Molech's fires are cold. But the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the father of Jesus Christ, still calls. He is the storm and the silence, the warrior and the mother, the one who demanded the sacrifice and then became it. The triad promised you could have God on your terms. Yahweh invites you into a love story on his terms, which are, paradoxically, the terms of your deepest liberation. The evidence survived. The story is complete. The choice has always been yours. Walk out of Gehenna. Turn from the high places. Come home.